A story of iron, silence, and a little girl in yellow. Paths of honor. The kind of silence that settles over a highway at dawn is unlike any other silence in the world. It is not empty. It is full of everything the day has not yet said, full of prayers that left lips before the sun rose, full of the kind of hope that only breathes when no one is watching. That morning, the sun came slow and golden over the ridge above Redwood Falls, Montana. It crept across the asphalt like it was trying not to wake anyone. It touched the chrome of parked motorcycles and set them blazing like scattered stars on the gravel lot of a roadside diner called Rusty Spur Cafe. The sign above the door was missing the letter S, had been for 11 years, according to Donna, the owner, who said she'd fix it every spring and never did. Inside, the booths were cracked vinyl patched with electrical tape. The coffee came in mugs with chips along the rim, and the bacon was always just slightly too crispy. It was the kind of place that was perfect in every imperfect way. Outside, 6 motorcycles stood in a row like soldiers at rest, and at the picnic tables sat the men of Iron Vulture's MC. 6 of them, broad and quiet, and alive in that way that only men who've lived through hard things manage to be alive. The leather vests were heavy with patches, the backs bearing the image of a vulture mid-flight, wings spread wide, not descending to feed on death, but rising above it. That was the part most people never understood about the patch. They only saw the bird. They never asked what it meant. People whispered about iron vultures. In gas stations, in barbershops, in courthouse parking lots. Stay away from them. Trouble follows men like that. You don't know what they've done. But no one who said those things had ever sat with them at dawn, had never watched the way Ryder Knox folded his hands around his coffee mug like it was something precious, had never heard the way Blaze laughed, big and ridiculous and completely unself-conscious, at something Hawk said in a deadpan voice that made everything funnier. Had never seen the way these men looked at each other, with the kind of loyalty that doesn't come from contracts or convenience. It comes from surviving things together, from showing up when no one else did. Ryder Knox was the president of Iron Vultures, 38 years old, broad-shouldered, quiet-eyed, with a jaw that looked like it had been chiseled by someone who believed strongly in stubbornness. He had dark hair threaded with early silver at the temples, and a scar along his left forearm that he never explained to anyone. His hands were large and calloused, hands that had built engines, carried brothers, and held the weight of more grief than most men his age could name. He didn't talk much. He didn't need to. When Ryder spoke, people listened, not out of fear, but out of the strange instinct humans have when they sense someone who means exactly what they say. That morning, he was on his second cup of coffee, elbows on the table, watching the light move across the mountains. Beside him, Hawk was sketching something in a small notebook. Across from them, Blaze was arguing, cheerfully and incorrectly, that a breakfast burrito was technically a sandwich. Ghost, the youngest at 26, was losing the argument on purpose just to watch Blaze get more animated. Dagger sat at the end reading a worn paperback. Rex, the oldest at 52, had his eyes closed and his face tilted toward the sun. It was an ordinary morning, until it wasn't. The scream came from across the gravel lot, not loud in volume, but sharp in the way a blade is sharp. It cut straight through the laughter, through the bacon smell, through the sound of a truck idling at the pumps. Every head turned. A trucker by the pumps stared. A family in a minivan stopped with their windows halfway down. 2 waitresses appeared in the doorway. A man in a business suit looked at his phone, checked it, like maybe an app would tell him what to do. No one moved. No one except Ryder. He was off the bench and across the gravel in 3 seconds. He dropped to one knee in front of the little girl, putting himself at her level, making himself smaller so she wouldn't have to feel small. "Hey," he said. His voice, the voice people called rough, called dangerous, called intimidating, came out like a warm hand on a cold shoulder. "Hey, look at me. I'm right here. What's your name?" The girl's breath came in hiccuping sobs. Lila! Lila. He said it carefully, like it mattered, like she mattered. My name is Ryder. Tell me where your mama is, Lila. Tell me right now, and we'll go get her. Lila pointed with one trembling finger down the 2-lane road toward a cluster of run-down trailers barely visible behind a screen of pine trees. He came back, she whispered. He said he was going to hurt her bad this time. He has a bottle, and he's so angry. And Mama told me to run. She told me to run and get help. Her voice shattered. Ryder put one steady hand on her small shoulder. You did exactly right, he said firmly. You hear me? Exactly right. Then he stood. His jaw was a hard line. His eyes had changed. Something had come up behind them, something iron and absolute and old as justice. Blaze, Hawk, Ghost, Ride. That was all he said. 4 engines roared to life simultaneously, the sound rolling across the lot like thunder deciding to be purposeful. Tires bit into gravel. Dust rose in wide arcs as 4 motorcycles tore out of the lot and down the highway, moving with the kind of speed that says, we are not asking permission. Behind them, the parking lot exhaled. Rex wrapped his own vest around Lila's tiny shoulders. It swallowed her whole. She looked like a little girl wearing a building. He carried her inside to a booth by the window, and Donna brought hot chocolate without being asked, setting it down with a gentleness that said she was a mother once too. Lila sat with both small hands wrapped around the mug, her eyes never leaving the window.
She didn't know those men. She had run to them because they were the only ones who looked like they might be brave enough. She had made a calculation that most adults never think to make. She had looked past the leather and the patches and the sheer size of them, and she had seen something she needed. She had seen men who would not look away. Rex sat across from her, this 52-year-old man with hands like a blacksmith and a face like a mountain, and he said very quietly, "They're going to bring her back, little one. Ryder doesn't leave people behind, never has, not once in his life." Lila looked at him with her enormous eyes. "Promise," she whispered. Rex held her gaze for a long moment. "Promise," he said. Down the road, behind the pine trees, a woman named Marisol was running out of time. She was 32 years old, with dark eyes that had once been full of plans. She had grown up in Redwood Falls, had worked 2 jobs to save enough to leave, had left, had built something small but her own, a life with clean sheets and books on the nightstand, and a daughter who laughed like music. She had done everything right, filed the paperwork, changed her number, moved twice, and still he had found her. Her ex-husband Daniel had been released from county jail 4 days ago. She hadn't known until this morning when she heard his truck at 6 a.m. while Lila was still sleeping. She had told Lila to run, told her go to the diner, find someone, anyone, and then she had put herself between the door and her daughter's bedroom. What happened in those next minutes was the kind of thing that leaves marks that doctors can't always see. He was drunk and he was cruel, and he was the specific kind of dangerous that comes from a man who has decided he has nothing left to lose. Marisol had stopped crying. She had learned years ago that crying made him angrier. So she stood with her back against the cracked wall, lips split and cheeks swelling, and she held herself very still, and she prayed. Not a big prayer, not a sermon, just one word, over and over. Please, please, please. She didn't know who she was praying to. She didn't know if anyone was listening. Then the door came off its hinges. Not opened, not kicked. It came off its hinges, the frame splitting, daylight flooding the dark room like a verdict. Ryder caught Daniel's wrist mid-swing, the fist that had been pulling back for another blow, and twisted with a controlled, precise violence that came from a man who had learned the difference between cruelty and justice a long time ago, and chose the right side of that line every single time. Daniel went down. Blaze and Ghost had him pinned before he could process what was happening. Hawk stood in the doorway, and his face, normally easy,
Normally, the face of a man who laughs readily was absolutely still. No speeches, no threats, no performance of power. Just action, just the thing itself. Ryder turned to Marisol. He crossed the small room and knelt beside her where she had slid down the wall, and he looked at her face, cataloged the damage with eyes that had seen too much of this kind of thing. And then he said, very quietly, like he was telling her something true that she needed to hear, "You're safe now. It's over. You're safe." Something broke open in Marisol's chest. Not more fear, not more pain, something else entirely. The specific and overwhelming release that comes when a person who has been holding themselves together with everything they have is finally allowed to let go. She wept, long and hard and without apology. Ryder didn't move, didn't rush her, didn't tell her it was okay or that she needed to calm down. He just stayed there, steady as a wall, while she came apart, and then slowly, piece by piece, came back together. In the distance, sirens began to build. When the police arrived, the bikers were standing outside the trailer, calm, hands visible, the way men stand when they have done nothing wrong and know it. Deputy Clara Walsh had been on the force in Redwood Falls for 9 years. She had responded to calls involving iron vultures twice before. Both times, the story the neighbors told and the evidence that told were two entirely different things. She had learned to trust the evidence. She took in the scene. Daniel sitting in the gravel with zip ties on his wrists, glaring at nobody in particular. Marisol sitting on the trailer's front step, wrapped in a leather vest 2 sizes too large, a cold pack held to her face by a man who was crouching beside her and clearly explaining what the paramedics were going to do so she wouldn't be frightened. Deputy Walsh looked at Ryder. Ryder looked back. "She's going to need photographs of the injuries," he said. "He's been in county before. Domestic, 2019. Should be on file." Walsh almost smiled. "You a lawyer now, Knox?" "No, ma'am. Just paying attention." She nodded slowly. "We'll take it from here." "I know you will." He stepped back, gave her the space. That was the thing about Ryder. He knew when to move and when to yield, and the distinction he made was never about his ego. It was always about what was needed. As Daniel was led to the patrol car in handcuffs, still muttering, still believing somehow that he was the victim of this morning, Marisol watched him go. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. Walsh had seen that look before, the look of a woman filing something away behind her eyes, a record, a line drawn. The last time. Then a sound came from the road. A small figure running, curls flying, yellow dress, arms already reaching forward even from a distance. "Mama!" Marisol stood up so fast she nearly fell. She crossed the distance in 3 steps and caught Leela and held her so tightly, both of them crying, rocking together in the pale morning light while the deputies looked elsewhere and the bikers turned away to give them the moment. Ryder stood with his back to the scene, hands in his pockets, watching the pine trees. His shoulders moved once, just once, with something that he would never name out loud. Hawk appeared at his shoulder, said nothing, just stood there. That was enough. They drove back to Rusty Spur Cafe slowly. No roaring engines this time. They rode like a processional. Marisol sitting behind Ryder, arms around his waist, Leela riding with Blaze and clinging to him like she'd known him all her life. Ghost rode ahead to clear the way. Hawk and Dagger flanked them on either side. A little convoy, a strange and improbable family moving down a Montana highway in the early morning light. When they pulled into the lot, a crowd had gathered. Word travels fast in small towns, and faster still when the story is the kind people want to believe in. Locals, truckers who had stayed, the family from the minivan who hadn't been able to make themselves drive away, Donna standing in the diner doorway with both hands pressed to her mouth. Silence fell as Ryder pulled in and cut his engine. He helped Marisol down first. Then he lifted Leela off Blaze's bike and set her gently on the gravel and took one look at her face. This child, this tiny brave girl in her faded yellow dress, and something moved through his expression that was gone before most people could name it. But Leela saw it. She walked up to him and put her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his vest and held on. Ryder placed one large hand on the back of her small head. Donna brought blankets. The Iron Vultures, one by one, removed their vests and draped them over Marisol's shoulders, over Leela, over the empty space between them that needed filling. It was a gesture that meant nothing to people who didn't know their world, and meant everything to people who did. A vest was not a piece of clothing. A vest was identity. It was earned and it was sacred, and giving it to someone meant you were putting your name between them and the cold. Deputy Walsh, standing nearby, watched it happen. She looked down at her notepad. She didn't write anything. Some things you just let be. Marisol stood in the middle of all those vests and all that leather and all that quiet loyalty, and she said, her voice barely holding itself together, "I didn't think anyone would come. I've been alone in this for so long, I stopped believing anyone would come." Ryder looked at her for a moment. Then he looked down at Leela. "She made sure we did," he said. That day changed something in Redwood Falls. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the way that real change happens, quietly, in small acts, accumulating like snow. The town showed up for Marisol and Leela. Furniture appeared outside their new apartment above the hardware store. Donna organized it, but the whole town contributed. Groceries left on the doorstep. A second-hand bicycle for Leela, painted yellow by someone who noticed the dress. A library card, winter coats, a pot of soup every Sunday from Mrs. Reyes next door. And every Sunday morning, the sound of motorcycle engines could be heard outside Rusty Spur Cafe. Not in menace, not in warning, just in loyalty. The particular and irreplaceable loyalty of people who have decided that showing up is what they do, and they will keep doing it, and no one needs to ask. Ryder would sit at the corner booth with his black coffee, and Leela would sit across from him and tell him everything. About school, about her teacher who let her take books home, about the bird she saw outside her window that she was pretty sure was sending her messages, about everything and nothing and all the ordinary, extraordinary details of a child's life rebuilding itself. He would listen, really listen. Not the way adults pretend to listen while thinking about other things, the way someone listens when they understand that what the other person is saying is the most important thing being said anywhere in the world right now. Ghost started helping her with homework on Tuesdays. Blaze taught her to whistle. Hawk drew her a picture of a vulture in flight, beautiful and precise, and she framed it and hung it above her bed. Marisol got a job at the county clerk's office. She enrolled in night classes. The shaking in her hands got less, then stopped. The way she held herself in a room changed, slowly, almost imperceptibly, from braced for impact to simply standing. One evening, walking past Rusty Spur, she looked in through the window and saw Ryder at the corner booth, head bent over something, Leela across from him talking with her hands the way she did when she was excited. He was nodding. His coffee had gone cold. He didn't notice, or didn't care. Marisol stood there for a long moment. Then she went inside and sat down and ordered a coffee and joined the conversation.
In the spring, when the frost finally gave way and the wild flowers came up along the highway shoulders in purple and gold, Leela ran into Rusty Spur one Sunday morning with something held behind her back and a look on her face that meant she had been planning this for a while. Ryder was at the counter. She ran up to him and thrust the paper toward him. It was a crayon drawing. In the drawing, 6 motorcycles were parked in a row. Above them, the sun was a big yellow circle with lines radiating out like a child's understanding of glory. In the foreground, a tall figure with a silver thread on his vest was kneeling in front of a small figure in a yellow dress. The small figure had her arms out. At the bottom, in careful, slightly uneven letters, "This is us." Ryder looked at the drawing for a long time. The cafe was loud around him, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the coffee machine, Donna arguing with the radio. Blaze was laughing at something Hawk said. The door kept opening and closing. None of it touched him right now. He was looking at a drawing made by small hands that had once been trembling with fear and now steady enough to hold a crayon and make something beautiful. He was looking at what it means when a child decides someone is safe enough to draw them into her world, to put them in her picture, to say, "You are part of my story now." He folded it carefully, precise at the edges, the way you fold something you intend to keep. He opened the breast pocket of his vest, the one over his heart, and tucked it inside. "That's riding with me," he said. Leela beamed like the sun in her drawing. She climbed up onto the stool beside him and stole a sip of his coffee and made a face at the bitterness and then stole another sip anyway. He let her. There is a story that people in Redwood Falls tell years later to strangers passing through. They'll point at the corner booth in Rusty Spur Cafe and say that's where he always sat. They'll tell you about the morning a little girl ran across a parking lot and changed everything she touched. They'll tell you about the